Hey, Duke. Thanks for joining me today. Let's talk about power in social setups and social interactions.
Hi, David. Happy to be here.
It's been a long time.
Yeah. 12
Let's
hours.
let's touch on something that you're like an actual expert at, which is power dynamics in social interactions, and most important, I mean, in group dynamics. Um, I would like to know how you see the importance of having power within a group, like in a group, having the most powerful positions, having the ascendance versus being maybe like, let's say, the second in the hierarchy, and what are some practical tools that you have developed to navigate power dynamics in within group settings?
Oh, this is a whole subject. Okay.
Yeah.
We just pre-podcasted and uh I still got surprised by the question. so um yeah, okay, well first off, I think we got to define power. We were talking about that yesterday in the other podcast. Um because power means so many different things to so many people. Um, and I think my working definition for how I teach in the seminars and stuff is your ability to get people to comply with your vision. So not necessarily, get them to move and act and behave the way you want them to, but get them to sort of agree with your vision and then follow you along, at least in conversational dynamics, so that you can gain sort of respect and get credit for later when you're later trying to influence behavior. So I think power has everything to do with the amount of attention that you can get from people and the amount of compliance you can get from them uh, as you're relating your vision. And obviously, the components of that are your ability to communicate your vision effectively in a way that lands well for them and sets the kind of frames about their role in your vision. So it's super complicated in that way. And then let me touch on hierarchies really quick, and then we'll come back and unfold some stuff. Um, it's kind of tone deaf to try to be the number one in every social group. There's a lot of the early guys in pickup. They always wanted to take over, and they would have this communication style that was very performant, and they would walk into a group and try to be the number one of attention and compliance, right? They would stand in front of people and tell big stories, and everybody would check in or check out, and they would control the group this way. However, when a lot of new people go in and they read that stuff and they listen to that kind of mentality, they don't understand that the experts at this stuff flow. They get into a conversation, they find little waypoints where they can convey their stuff, and they slowly take over by building rapport with each of the members of the group, or locking out members of the group or whatever. It's really an art. Like the getting power in a large group situation isn't about just asserting yourself and being fully authentic and getting everybody to connect with you on an individual level, because in any situation, whether it's in the boardroom or in the bar, there are so many different variables. Like half of the people are drunk, some girl lost her phone, whatever. Or if you're in the boardroom, everybody there has power. Like they can all vote somebody out, right? If you're at a networking event, like there are people who make way more money than you and make way bigger moves than you. And if you try to be the most powerful man in the room in as far as influence, you're going to get squashed. And if you don't have the credits to back yourself up, like me, I'm a pretty powerful communicator. But in most business scenarios, like we have this small startup at Limitless, like we don't make big moves, and do Series D funding and all this other stuff. Like we operate in a different world, so I have to flex the power that I do have, but I'm not going to pretend like I'm better than anybody there. You know, uh, so as far as hierarchies are concerned, I think it's a big newbie mistake to think that you need to be the alpha or need to be the number one person in the room at all times, and it takes a much more calibrated view of how the hierarchy is currently acting at the moment and how you fit into there in order to kind of weasel your way into um, gaining status through that hierarchy. You have to identify it first before you get, before you can traverse it. So those are the two things I wanted to cover in general, and then we can kind of dig into the depths on those things.
Yep, that's a lot of things we can drift on.
Yeah.
Go with the first one that I got. Essentially, what I would like to react on is you mentioned something interesting is that there is different types of powers within different contexts. One is, let's say, strategic power or something that has to do with position, with the role you have. You were talking about, let's say, business setups. That will be dependent on the role that someone has and the leverage that someone has in decision making. Then you have, let's say, personal power, meaning how you come off as a person. Do you have any special characteristic or something about you that makes you the person with the, I don't know, some form of expertise, or like you said, some form of communication skills, interpersonal skills, or charisma, or some ability to influence others through being a respected and appreciated leader, I would say, right? Or could also be the ability to manipulate. But Tony Robbins has these two concepts of leadership: servant leadership versus strategic or positional leadership. They will be a little bit different in your way of presenting. And the third that I got here is relational power, meaning within structures, within groups of people, there is also power that comes from leveraging relationships with other people. So it's like three different things that we're talking about here that already like adds a lot to the variables. So I don't know if it would make sense to just focus on one of these or react to that. But essentially, in all of these, the second thing that you kind of mentioned or that I got from this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that let's say the origin of that power that you exert in that group can be very different. It can have a different source. Like you can have power because you are let's say, legitimately the person that has the position. Example, an authority figure like a policeman will always have power over someone that is listening to him, like a normal citizen, because it has like a label or an authority. But it can also come from a certain expertise, like your communication skills. It can come from an interpersonal skill, the ability to create a connection with someone. So there's all these sources of power and all these different contexts for power. I would say what I'm the most curious in is if someone comes to you and he's like, okay, I'm fucking lost because there's too many things here. What the fuck is power? I want to look powerful. I want to be perceived as powerful. What should I do? Like, where should I start? There's just too many things and too many variables. What should I do?
Well, just like every goal in life coaching, from pickup to goal setting to whatever, you have to know where you're going. Begin with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey says, right? There are a lot of guys who are like, I want to look confident, I want to look powerful, I want to look, whatever, and they'll say something like that. And my question to them right away is like, okay, what does power mean to you, right? And what is the end result? What are you trying to get? It's like, oh, I just want to. And a lot of guys, like one of my clients this week, I was talking to him, and he says he wants to be an excellent seducer, right? Like he wants to be able to talk to any woman and get her sexually interested in him, right? And I said, okay, well, why do you want to do that, right? Because one, that's not possible. Yeah, everybody's different or whatever, and to be that kind of person, you'd have to be a incredible chameleon that doesn't really have an identity of your own in order to be able to pull any woman. You'd have to like be able to match her mind, all 16 Jungian personality types and be able to hit her. Like that's not possible. Like even Casanova just found victims that like really hit his little niche,
Target. Yes.
um but I said, so why do you want to do that? And as we drove through the whole process in his brain, it was really that he didn't feel worthy as a man among men, and he thought that if he could pull uh hot women that other men couldn't, he would have an advantage of them in their social group. I'm like, wait, you want
Yeah.
to pull hot girls because you want men to respect you? Yes, right? And it's like, oh, okay. Well then, if that's the kind of power you're looking for, then wouldn't it be better to have general conversational skills with women and be able to bring groups of women to the men, right? Like you don't have to go down this path of trying to navigate the structures of their sexual unlockedness, uh, and go 8 months down the road to try to figure out how to pull, right? Why don't you open up groups, get them interested, and then mingle them together with the men that you're with? Don't you think that that's going to create much more respect and much more good times for everybody, and have you in the memories of everybody as the facilitator? And he's like, yeah, that actually makes a lot more sense. Right? So I'm not saying that, pickup isn't a worthy goal or pulling isn't a worthy goal, but you have to know your end goal when you say things like, I want to be powerful, I want to be respected, I want to be the top of the class in the hierarchy or whatever. You have to know why. Because once you know why, you can find solutions that are going to be much more efficient to dealing with that. Because if he wanted social acceptance amongst a group of men, it's going to be much more effective to learn how to integrate groups of people and get them to meet each other, because that's going to create the experiences that are going to they're going to hold in their mind. I had a client that came out to Las Vegas to talk to me, and he's the kind of guy, yeah, multimillionaire, uh, hair always has to be perfect, and always self-conscious about his, and very reserved about how he gives things out to the world. Very powerful dude. And he just sits in the seminar and stares at me talking and like checks out. You can see it in his eyeballs. But when we go out in field, he's like keenly looking to see what I'm doing when I'm talking to groups of people in the Vegas nightclubs and the lounges. And last time we went out there, he was like, we were talking theory and stuff, and he was talking about business, and we were talking about how he needed to get on like panels and stuff like that. And then we get out in the field, and he said, "Hey, should I go talk to those girls?" And I'm like, "Well, duh, right? Like, what did you fly to Vegas for?" And he goes, and he said, "Will you come talk to him with me?" I was like, "No, you go open, and then if they want to hang out with you, invite them over here, and I'll entertain everybody." And he's like, "Okay." So we brought him over, and then bam, the next hour and a half was this hilariously great, wonderful time with these three girls that were real estate agents, and they were there for seminar, and we had this great, beautiful moments, right? And that stuck in his head for the entire week and very on, because it was experiential, right? My power in that situation was my ability to meld that group together. It's the ability that he didn't have, right? And then he respected me for it, and then was willing to listen and comply to my vision, right? Um, and had nothing to do with the hours of theory and bullshit that I was talking about beforehand, right? Like none of that landed for him, but being able to watch people laugh and progressively trust me more as I was building up this group, like that was like the thing. And so I think that in any sort of power dynamic thingy, what's the word I'm looking for? Any sort of power dynamic goal, like you have to know what you're trying to accomplish first. And I knew that my primary goal was not to uh, make these women, feel sexually interested, even though that did happen. Um, my primary goal was to open his eyes onto what was possible in real time. And so then I executed in that manner and got my goal accomplished. And he got much more rapport with me and all that, whatever. And it didn't have anything to do with my hierarchy. It didn't have anything to do with my business acumen, right? It had everything to do with this is what this guy needs right now. In the moment, I'm going to execute to try to make that happen. And in the
Yeah,
boardroom,
because there is
on
no
the, oh, go
there
ahead.
isn't any moment. Sorry, there isn't any moment where it looks to me that, and knowing you, I know this is what you did. There is no moment where you told yourself, "Oh, I'm better than this. Like I'm better than this guy, or I want to be better." You were just trying to actually solve a problem and lead everyone to there. Like you took a leadership position, not a position where you wanted to like fight for the hierarchy. That's basically I mean, obviously that's a different consciousness. If you are trying to beat everyone and look like you're the best versus actually try to do something that serves everyone, that's the main difference. So it has a completely, I mean, I think both of these things are important in power. If two guys come together and their goal is to fight to be the best, let's say on the status, there will be a winner and it will be very factual. It will just be the one that has the best status if you
Right.
show up with this intention, right? But you flip the situation such that your own skills, characteristics, abilities, personal traits could flourish in that as you took the leadership position based on those attributes. So that's very interesting because that says that like power doesn't have a specific definition. It's very context based, and you can also take over, like you can take responsibility over a situation, which means you also take power over the situation, or you display some form of power, and you can twist like the entire setup of an interaction such that you are in power. So essentially, is it that power has to be taken, or is it that you can just reframe situations such that they fit your own strength and power?
Well, I think that uh, going from our original definition of power for my, the when I
Yes.
first started, it was the ability to um, get compliance in your vision, right?
Mhm.
And so obviously tweaking things towards my skill set is obviously going to be the best bit I
Yes.
have for power. Um, there are times where, like, let's not get it twisted. I am superior in many different aspects because I've spent 20 years in field doing
Yes.
this stuff and teaching men, right? Like I have
Hmm.
skill sets or whatever. So when I come with the performance confidence of it, like I don't have to say I'm superior and I need to move myself in this hierarchy. I already know
Yes.
that there are very few people in the world that can exhibit the things that I do because of my long-term expertise. Same thing with a master carpenter or a senior developer, computer programmer, or whatever. Like they just know that they're good, and at that
Yeah.
point, they don't have to prove anything, right? So there's
Correct.
a certain level of that going on. I'm not sitting there going, yeah, okay, well, I need to exert dominance over this other man so that he'll follow my lead. Like, no,
Correct. Exactly.
no, I just need to find what
No, it's
he.
just like essentially if it was a wrestling game, if it was a wrestling match, you just put yourself in a situation where you're the strongest, whether it's on the ground, whether it's at distance, whether it's with a certain setup pressure, whatever it is. You just adapt your environment to your own skill set and what you're
Yeah,
good at to exert some form of power. Though that's a great news for everybody listening because that means that literally everyone can do that in one way or another. There might be a learning curve, but it's not like some people have power and other people don't. We all have a certain power that we can either use or not. It's kind of like a superhero, right? Like everyone has superpowers that they can find or discover and then train them and learn how to use them properly. But everyone has something that they're like essentially good at that
yeah.
can help them to get powerful.
And when it comes to confidence in social situations, a lot of the people who hire us are like not particularly confident when dealing with novel situations with people that they don't know, right?
Yes.
Um, when it comes to that, like one of the biggest realizations that you can have is that most people are looking to be led. Like if you go into a social situation, there's usually one. or two leaders in a group, whether whether they're just a little meetup of people who just met each other tonight, or whether they're long-term friends. And the longer the group has existed as a unit, the more entrenched the hierarchies are, right? And I got this from one of my old coaches, Greg. I forgot his name. Man, it's probably been 15 years, but I'll find his name and put it in the show notes if I can figure it out. But he's probably not teaching anymore. But he said that there were two leaders in every group, and I found this to be true over the years. There was um, the the instigator and the permissor. There was the person who says, "Let's all go here," or "We should all move in this direction. We should all do something." And then there's one other person in the group that would say yes or no, and everybody would look at that person to
And then do
figure
what
to
they do.
validate,
Yes.
and checks and balance the guy who was going to be the impulsive, decisive decision maker, right?
Yes.
Because if the decision maker's like, okay, we all need to go to this after party, and then everybody would look at the other guy, and the other guy would be like, yeah,
No.
I'm kind of hungry though. Maybe we should hit, a restaurant first or whatever. And then they're like, oh, okay. And then the decider would be like, all right, Denny's, and then we'll go to the after party. Okay, cool. And then everybody would move. And everybody else are content being led, told what should be the next step, told what to do, right? And there are times in a social environment that you don't need to be either one of those things. You just need to go along and then build rapport individually with one or two of the other components of members of the group, right? Like I don't, as a in-field coach, like I only need to maintain authority with a man and his doubts, right? Like I need to make sure that when he starts spiraling and second guessing himself and giving himself limits with beliefs, that I have enough authority to pull him out of that hole and get him to consider things and reframe in other directions. I don't need authority in the social group of the club. I don't need to be over the bouncer. I don't need to be over the
Yes.
guy himself. He can actually lead anything that he wants to do, just as long as if he starts dipping below his ability to be effective, he trusts me to pull him out, right? That's
Yeah.
that's the only rapport that I need in that scenario. So I don't need to be like, I'm alpha and dominant and I'm better than you and I da 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 and you should submit to my no. That's like not it's not useful. Because the end goal, like you were talking kind of altruistic earlier where you were saying, "Oh, if you make it a win-win and you try to solve a problem for everybody, that's going to be a different type of power." Yes and no. Like the guy's hired me to solve those problems, and so I have that authority, right? So that's
Mhm.
why the goal is important. It's not some sort of universal moral thing, but
Yeah,
uh,
in that case, authority is given. Like they have chosen to give the authority. You just need to act congruently to what they expect from this. It's actually interesting in this conversation. I'm learning a little bit about myself as well. When you're talking about these, the way authority is built, I didn't really ask myself too many questions. It's not something that I actively check when I'm coaching. But you're absolutely right. It's like essentially this authority or let's go back to the concept of power because that's the value that we're kind of discussing now,
yeah,
is built in key moments. And it's like 5% of the time where you have to really do something about it that is very important can, I mean, is just 100 times more effective than the 95% of the rest of the time. It's just about moments where you, let's say, take ownership when others don't, right? It's like I can quote Tony Robbins all day about like, when he says leaders do X and others don't. Like there's like 20 of these descriptions. And that's exactly where you build the power is when you're able to somehow, and to be honest, in most sports is the same thing. Like the team that wins, or Roger Federer retired and he gave a speech that is fantastic, where he looked at the stats of all his games and he won, I think only 56% of all the total points that he played. So it's only 6% more than half, let's say. So he lost almost half of the points, yet he was winning, 85, 90% of his games because of winning the important points. And also, as a result, he has respect and, let's say, the authority or the person that is looked up to by most specialists and players and fans. So how is that something that people can learn to do, is to recognize the important moments where power is taken or power is used? How to learn how to yeah, just observe it, to find it, and what to do about it. How should someone think?
Well, it goes back to goals, right? If you're going to go out in a social situation, like if you're doing pickup, or if you're going to go, to a networking event or something, you have to know what you're trying to get out of the thing and what you're trying to get out of the people there, right? Like, if you don't have a clear vision on where to lead to, leading is pointless, right?
Mhm.
Like, if you don't want to take a group to do something afterwards, or set up a later event, or get two people to meet up with each other, if you don't have those goals, you coming up with random ideas doesn't really sway anybody, right? So that's the first thing. You have to know what you're trying to get accomplished. And usually when I go out at night for the dating stuff, is I'm trying to create emotional memories with people, and B, future project our friendship or relationship. So those are the two main things I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get them to laugh, get angry, some sort of emotional spike. And then I also want to future project our stuff. So, like, we're going to hang out on Wednesday, or next week I'll see you at the same bar, or
Mhm.
we should definitely go to a concert together since we have similar music interests. There's this one coming up in September, right? Like, I'm future projecting, okay, we are going to hang out again because we like each other, right? And
Yeah.
if I can get some emotional spikes, and I can get kind of a buy-in to, like, we can hang out later. And it happens on the micro too. Like, in a
Mhm.
daytime approach, you go and you say, "Hey, you're beautiful. I want to meet you." And they're like, "Oh yeah." And you're like, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that once we get married, and we have 15 kids, they're all gonna be really beautiful, And you say stuff like this, you're gonna plant a seed in the person's mind of, like, okay, well, even though this is a big joke, I'm gonna imagine you, at least for a second, me and you together in the future, right? Whether it's an event, like, whatever. So those are the two primary goals I have when I go out and I'm doing the dating stuff. And now that I have those goals in mind, then I can look for moments. So you said to be observant. There is going to be a time where leadership doesn't exist. Somebody there is just pinging and looking for what to do next, how to think about things, what's going on with their dramatic situation with their friend or whatever. And there are going to be moments where the leader of the group, or the one alpha guy who's kind of lording over the three girls, because he's the head server at the restaurant they all work at, and they come out to hang out. He's not going to be able to manage that moment. It's there, like, the girls are going to say something, and like, I don't know if we should have another drink, or we should go to the other place or whatever. And then there'll be a moment where he's like, yeah, no, we need to go over here. My friend's over there. Let's go, blah, blah, blah. And he's fully alpha. But sometimes he'll just drop the ball. And then you're like, you know what? I know this guy over here, and he makes a great Manhattan. I don't know if you're a big Manhattan fan, but we should fucking roll over there. I gotta say hi to him anyway. It gives you the opportunity to provide leadership in a way that provides value, that doesn't step on the other guy's toes because he dropped the ball. Like, you just notice the points where there is a vacuum of leadership, and then you can just step in to fill
And you
that role,
step in.
right?
Correct.
And
Yes.
that is probably the most insidious, like, subtle way of controlling a group, is because,
I would call that elegant.
okay, I
It's
see.
it's fucking elegant. It's super elegant. Like, I like that. It's just it's it's displaying power without the force. I like to go back to these concepts because they go back to something we teach a lot, which is the scale of consciousness, or we
Yeah,
use
yeah,
that
yeah.
model a lot. And that is essentially power. It's just what's necessary. It's super elegant. I think that's perfect. It's like, don't do more than necessary, more than enough for people to start to think, oh, this guy is like arrogant or he thinks too much. I'm definitely guilty of that. Like when I was like on my, like, I'm still probably in there, of course. But for a long time, I was like, and you probably saw that being with me, I was showing leadership traits or exulting power, but it was a little bit forceful. It was like a little bit too much sometimes, or like forced, or not necessary in some moments. And everything flows so much smoother when it's exactly what you said. Recognize the moments where leadership is needed and you just fulfill that role. Why? Because then people are naturally grateful because it's a need. So you fulfill someone's need to be led, heard, appreciated, guided, and so on. And that's something that I learned only when I actually dove into, or I have ways to test that, only when I dove deeper into hypnosis. There's 3/4 tests that I always do with everybody when I don't know them, or actually in general, when I'm, everybody has a different state. Like you meet them in one place and then you meet them in another place. They will be different. Like we're different in different environments and with different people. So the three things that always need to be checked, and maybe we'll dive into that in another podcast. I'm just going to mention them. The first one is like a suggestibility test, meaning if I tell you, oh, Duke, you must be really happy today because of XYZ accomplishment, and I look at your reaction, some people will be like, yes, of course. And they just take your suggestion and they immediately feel what you're
Yeah,
suggesting them to
yeah, for
feel, or
sure.
they are doing what you suggest them to do. Some people won't, is the people that are very resistant. I'm of that type. Generally, when you tell me something, unless I know you and we have built a connection first, my suggestibility is low. So usually I will pull back. Like you will tell me to experience, feel something, do something. Immediately I'm going to be like, no, I'm in charge. That's something very important to test. Second is relaxation tests, making like testing what's the like stress level of the people. Because if someone is more relaxed, in both extremes, people will listen to you more. If they're hyper stressed and they need that leadership, that's what you're talking about. Usually the need for leadership happens in stressful situations. Uh, that's where you can step in, or in situations where there is no stress whatsoever. These are the places where people are the most suggestible as well. And three, compliance tests, exactly what you said. And that with girls, that happens in the first 3 seconds. If you just say something, like the way I usually do it with people is like, oh, let's just move over here. And we just move them one step to the
Yeah.
left, one step to the right to check how they move and see how they respond. Sometimes it's also useful to do something like I don't know how that would be the best word to describe it, but something like an imagination test. What's the ability of someone to project themselves in the future or visualize something? Because that will tell me how easy I'll be able to articulate an idea in their own way. Meaning, uh, the more abstract I can be with someone, the more they will interpret what I'm saying based on the way they filter the world, meaning with their own words. So with someone that has a high ability to imaginate things, uh, you can be really subtle, like you said, and just make broad comments on or talk about something in a very abstract way, and they will, because they are suggestible, like highly suggestible, they will adjust what you are saying to their view of the world, and then they will just believe it. That's actually what happens a lot with, let's say, well, it's also used in sects or generally in for example, in veganism. A vegan that will hear an information can be super abstract, like plants are good, and he will find his own references and own ways to really back that up because they are already in this very suggestible frame. So it's a super important dynamic that you just mentioned. This ability to step in, do something in the moment when it's needed, because then when it's needed, people will really be grateful for you to have power. Power is not necessarily something that people like want to get at all costs. It's something that is useful to have when it's needed. Probably went on like too many tangents here, but yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking about a power vacuum or whatever, and on a dating level, you meet two girls at the bar, and they're kind of got their own conversation going, and you break in, you talk, and you show your value or whatever. Um, that's a general expected thing at a watering hole, right? At a bar or a lounge, right? Because they wouldn't go to the lounge if they didn't want to have some sort of social interaction, whether it's to be approved or noticed or talked to or whatever. They would just go get a drink in the quiet part of a restaurant somewhere, you know. They wouldn't go to a lounge or a bar
Yes.
in order to not be approached. So it's normalized there. But um so many guys, they go out and they bumble into the interaction trying to lead right away when they already have their own program going. Like the girls already have their own program going. Say it's a group of two. They already kind of have plans and they're willing to get kind of moved off the path or whatever. But if you assert a good idea when they're in the middle of deliberating something, they're willing to give their power to you, right? Because your idea is seems more interesting or more fun or more advantageous to their goals, right? And leadership in that space, if your end goal is to get some sort of intimacy with one of these women, is for her to be able to trust you to do something that is outside of her bounds of what she normally does. We've all had you and I have had the occurrence where a girl wants to get laid and she leads the whole interaction and makes everything easy for you and lets you kind of go through the gates of her labyrinth, right? Like she sets up these things where there are waypoints, and if you pass the test, then she already had this in mind, and you met the criteria, and she's leading the whole time. Like you don't lead the whole thing, and generally those interactions are not as fun for me, right? Because the polarity
Yes.
isn't there. And so I kind of stopped dealing with those people. Like I don't, I don't let girls pull me. You know,
Hmm.
I think that seduction needs to be mutually involved. And so I very often, in order to create the rapport and the hierarchical dynamics of the thing, in order to create the best possible scenario for all of our pleasure and future and all that stuff, I give them power to do things so that they have a role that they're in charge of,
Yes.
right? And like for instance, right? You and I are coaches at Limitless. You own the company, right? So when I come to a Limitless event and we do a big 7-day seminar, we don't have hierarchical issues where like I'm more smart or powerful than David or whatever, and I'm
Nope.
usually um inferior. Like I don't want to say anything or do anything that's going to tarnish the Limitless's name because of my breadth of experience of whatever. So when you say something, I usually defer to you because everybody looks at you as the leader of this company, and then I take the coaching role. However, I have plenty of power where it's needed in that scenario, and people respect me just fine, right? Like it, we're not necessarily even equals in that dynamic, but I am using the appropriate amount of power to get what I need to accomplish, which is to get guys to change their lives, right? Like that's the primary goal for me. So I don't need to show any sort of hierarchical dominance or cut you off or stop your decision making because that's your role. And
Hmm.
uh, in a sense, I give that to you, and also you take it, and nobody fights about it because like
Yeah.
we did. And a lot of times,
It's mutually beneficial as well.
yeah.
So that's another, yeah.
And so there's no reason for me
Okay.
to go play alpha in that scenario because the end goal doesn't require me to do so.
Yeah, but there's still power involved in that, like if in this exchange that you described, uh, there is power in collaboration as well,
Sure.
right? That's what we described. So, uh, that's, I mean, the thing that it makes me think of is eventually power is how would I say that? There's levels to power, and the more your power allows others to feel empowered, the more your power will be respected, the more it will be important. in most situations. I don't know if there is like actual
I actually disagree.
like that's. I wanted to actually ask if yeah, what you thought about that. So that's perfect.
Um, well, I'm gonna go into the dark side for about 4 seconds, and then if you guys want us to talk deeper on those topics, leave comments and hit us up about specific questions and that stuff, so that because I don't think it's palatable for the entire audience in the world, right? Because there is power the way that you think, when you first egotistically want power, right? You can plant
Yes.
seeds in people's minds. You can make them do things that they don't necessarily want to do. You can convince them, right? But usually that's a short-term strategy. And we talk a lot here at Limitless about the long-term strategies. And yes, there's power in collaboration, but you said that when you empower other people, it's better. Yes, when those people believe that they have something to offer. If they
Clarify that for me.
if they believe that they have something to offer the group or the situation, stopping them from using their abilities in that group makes them feel small, makes them feel limited, makes them feel compressed. And so if you empower them, they are going to respect you for allowing them to fit into the hierarchy. However, that's still like a 20% of people. Most people are idiots with low self-esteem and low self-worth. And they're happy to be relegated to some most people aren't idiots. Most people believe they are idiots.
Yeah.
Right? And
Uh-huh.
when you empower somebody who doesn't feel like they have the capabilities or that they're going to get a positive result, you actually induce stress. You get them.
Oh, like it's kind of like you put someone on the stage and now speak. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah. If you're like, all right, well, what do you want to do? I got two things. What should we do? And they're like, I don't know. They get all this anxiety and they get like, they don't want to make the wrong decision because then they're responsible. And like most people want to be led. That's what I was saying earlier. Is like,
Yeah.
I don't think that empowering everybody is always the best thing. I think that finding ways, and people will tell you the ways they feel are going to
Yes.
be the most powerful. That they are
Yeah.
going to be the most powerful. They're
Mhm.
going to tell you, and then you can use that.
You're right. That's like a general trend. That's actually how coaching has evolved. That's also one of the downsides of that is that nowadays people need so much to be told what to do, and I fell into that trap as well because at some point I thought it was like really good. That even going to the gym, people need to be told everything. Like it's quite crazy actually. In every areas of life, people need to be told what to do. And the first question is, what should I do? And that's a very disempowering question on its own. So I think it would be more about the way you define empowering versus what I define as empowering. But that's a topic for another. That's probably a topic for another podcast.
Yeah.
But that's yeah, that's a very good perspective. I agree with you on that. This is correct.
And as far as coaching, like, so you and we always have mentors and coaches. Always. Like, and whatever I suck at, I have a mentor. I have,
Yes.
I'm following somebody in their content for that particular thing. From music
Yes.
production to jujitsu to whatever, right?
Uh-huh.
There's nothing wrong with coaching. Like, it's nothing wrong saying like I need to be told what to do. However, you and I both iterate. So we went through a bunch of different coaches on how to do
Yes.
content, on how to do lead generation and all the stuff. And many of those coaches taught us some concepts. We learned, outgrew them, and then hired new coaches, right? Many
Yeah,
of
because that wasn't really coaching. That was consulting. You know. But anyways,
You're
subtle
very
difference.
semantic, my friend.
Yes, probably.
Yeah, okay. So, but in that example, there are many of my clients who hire me and then they want to be told what to do for a very long time.
Yes,
And
yes,
I have to break them of that habit because the entire
correct.
point of personal transformation is for you to take responsibility, ownership, accountability for your own behavior and your own thoughts, right? And so when they're
Yes.
like, okay, well, I tried this thing and it didn't work. I need a different line to use when I'm talking to somebody. I need a different way to change my state or whatever. I'm like, yeah, you might need a different way, but what do you think is the best way for yourself? I don't know. That's why I'm deferring to you.
Yes.
I'm like, well, you deferring to me on a long-term basis is the same reason you defer to everybody else in a social thing and you have no power.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
like you have to check in with yourself, figure out what you want, take the risk that it might not be the right thing and test it. Otherwise, you'll never have an identity in that social space and you won't be able to leverage any sort of
Yeah.
power.
And rely on your own resources. Like everyone is resourceful to a certain point,
Yeah.
and most of the time people are lazy to be resourceful. So that yeah. Okay. Yes, I agree with that.
And so I think the big trap of coaching is that, yes, the marketing says, hey, you are inadequate. In order to fix that, I have the answers. I try to keep away from that in
Yes.
the marketing, right?
Yes.
But many of the coaches have done that, and ever since the '80s, when the life coaching industry started flourishing, there's a lot of people who are like, you don't dress correctly. I'm a fashion expert, so I will tell you
Yeah.
everything you need to do. You don't shop for your food correctly, so let me shop for you. You don't work out correctly, so let me work out, set your workout plan. Yes,
Hmm.
but when you approach coaching, you should be looking to find the ways that you can improve what you want to do,
Hmm.
not have somebody tell you what to do. And yeah, like when you first came to me, right? You signed up for an event. We ended up in Ibiza, and you were a student at the time. You were what, 20 something years old, and
22.
yeah, so you're 22, and you had a thought in your mind of what you wanted to be and do when you grew up, and then you said, "I'm just going to follow whatever this guy says because I trust that he will bring me through the journey that I need to go through." Right? But at
Yes.
no point were you like, Duke is so amazing and I want to be just like him and I don't have my own thoughts on where to go, right? You submitted yourself to the coaching process for sure, in order to have the experiences, learn the lessons, and get the key
Correct.
distinctions for your resources. But you didn't you didn't fall in the trap of guruism, like, oh, I'm gonna
Hmm.
follow this guy forever. And that's why you made so much progress, because you had a place where you wanted to go, even if it was for a moment, to see what was possible to experience. Even if that was the goal, like you
Well,
achieved it,
because
you know?
yes, but also, I mean, sure, I probably have responsibility and do like in being a good student, but you also did the job well because every time you pushed me, like every time you told me to do something, it wasn't for me to do what you said so that it works. It was for you to open my eyes and my brain and sometimes my heart to other options that I didn't consider because you have more experience, because and more important than that, sometimes it's not even because you did it and it was great for you, is because you are able to, let's say, look at me from the outside and with expertise assess what could be an experience that could change my perspective. So most of the time it would be when I would tell you something like, oh, I don't know how to, well, I remember a few of these, like, I don't know how to, like, I feel just really anxious when I talk to the hottest girls. Then you would tell me, okay, cool. Let's start by, let's go to this place, and you will scan the room and then start by talking to the hottest girl. To which I would be like, oh, what? I didn't think about that, right? Because, and it's not even something you would have necessarily done for you. If yes, cool. But I'm 100% sure that your most of your coaching ability, because I learned from you, so I'm doing that, must be coming from there. It is because you can observe how the client or how the person, how the students reacts. You can point him to the experiences that will lead him to his own conclusions.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're, like just validate something that he thought is also a great idea. Like multiple times you told me, like, you really don't need to second guess yourself so much in many things, coaching and in business and whatever. And you're like, okay, you can just trust yourself and make your own decisions. That's something I always struggled with. It's not something that, like just beta male struggle. Everyone struggles with that, or at least I struggled with that, the difficulty to make decisions. And you're constantly reminding me you can make your own decisions. You're qualified enough, you have enough experience, and you're doing it well. That was reassuring, great. But deep down, I didn't believe it. It was reassuring for the moment, helped me, but it's only in the moments when you challenged me to make my own decisions and then showed me how it worked. Like we basically analyzed it backwards together. I made the decision and then we looked at it and we analyzed why it worked, that I created my own, let's say, resources from that.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I can always go back to. It's in my tool belt and I can constantly look back at it. So I think that's maybe another conversation if that's interesting for you. But I would say if someone is looking to hire a coach, be aware of what coaching actually is. Coaching is supposed to help you come up with your own answers and your own tools. You should always be equipped after the coaching to do it on your own, not to follow a certain step-by-step structure. That is not necessarily something you agree with or that you validate. It is fine to get experiences that, like I said, open your mind and take you through experiences that lead you to your own conclusions. And that should always be the case. It should never be something like, do this. Oh, you didn't get the result that I thought. Okay, well, it's because you did it wrong. That's not the point. It's like, okay, there was probably something that didn't fit well with you. How can we change it or twist it to fit you? If you're looking for consulting, that's different. If you're really looking for fucking, I don't know how to use a screwdriver. I need a like a manual for that. That's a whole different point. But there is no manual to being yourself. There is no manual for finding your own communication style. There is no manual. There's like philosophies and there is things that we can do, but essentially that's a self journey. Like now I'm kind of getting in too deep into this thing, but it's a whole different thing to just hear, okay, this is how I did it. You can try the same thing as me, or this is how you are. I would see this really work well for you. Or just ask a question. What have you done? Like in which context have you already solved a problem like this? And how can you do it again? It's a whole different dynamics. And even in coaching, there's different powers to those different roles that people take. And also, this is one of the reasons why people stick with us, because there is a very subtle power. We were talking about this elegant power, this ability to show up as someone that has more, power, influence, and let's say even decision making sometimes in the right moments. And 95% of the time, letting the client actually lead the way. I do that all the time with guys. Just let them talk, come up with, you do that too. Just talk into their own bullshit. And at some point, just ask the right question that makes them question what they said.
Yeah.
Right? That's also a different sort of power.
So I want to put a flag onto this concept, so that later on we can dive super deep into sort of pre-framing influence and getting people to think down certain lines, because that is probably from the coaching and from pickup, like getting a woman to think in a certain direction and then just throwing out just what's needed at the right moment in order for them to make a decision. That's it's nuanced, but it's core at influence. Like it's the core of influence. So we should put a fucking flag in that and talk about that in another podcast. As far as power though, let's wrap it up. Let's wrap it up. Let's talk about really quick. What's your experience in a novel situation? Like you have all these tools under your tool belt. You've been coaching for years. You've learned influence and pickup and social dynamics and all this stuff. What's something that super scares you to go into, and walk me through the process of how you calibrate to that situation and decide on what type of power to exert? Like how do you define your goals in that moment?
Oh, how I define goals or power. Okay.
So like what's a situation that
I think like everyone, the most tense situations are when you meet people, whether you know them or not, like whether someone told you about them before or not, might play a role or not, doesn't necessarily matter. But let's say when you meet someone that you immediately kind of have a respect for or would like to be liked by, we all have that. Like sometimes I would meet someone introduces me to a friend of a friend who is a multi-millionaire or a 9-figure earner or something like that, and he has something that I wish I had in my life and I'm working towards. So I immediately have like I don't necessarily have respect for the person yet, but for the concept that they represent, I have some form of respect. So in these situations, I think everyone has a little bit of anxiety or whatever. It's like, oh, this matters to me. Every time that some form of interaction will matter to me in the moment, okay, I will have this pressure. So I think this would be a great example. So typically when I meet people that have some form of that have something that matters to me, okay, that I would like to learn from, or that I would like to collaborate with, or that I would be really like, I see an opportunity there. I would have a like, is that the type of stuff that you're kind of looking for? This type of situations, and how I uh, personally define how I want to create the power dynamic in that.
Yeah, so you went really general. So give me
Yeah.
like a
Oh, you want
specific
something specific?
situation, and then walk me through your process on how. Okay, I'm gonna go have to have this interaction. Okay, I'm gonna go have to have this interaction. How am I gonna present myself? What am I gonna focus on? How do I manage my state? Like, just give me a scenario, and then like how you go about preparing for that, or it could be in the moment, it could be days in advance of a networking event or whatever.
Okay. I don't think I ever really prepare. The reason is it really depends. Like if I know that I have 3 hours with the person, is it's going to be different than if I have 20 minutes with the person. So it's situation matters. So I don't think you can ever really prepare that. Plus, if I prepare too much, then I'm running the risk of things not going the way I wanted. So it's like that will put more stress on myself than just like relying on my abilities in the moment. So generally, I would say I don't necessarily plan that. Uh, a specific example would be, so like I said, I recently met with a nine-figure business owner in on the holidays, and immediately when I saw or saw some glimpse of who he was, I was like, oh, cool. This is an interesting person. I heard some things about this person. I heard some good things, some bad things. I'm curious to see who he is, and I would like to see if there is like an opportunity to collaborate or at least create some form of a bond. Um, that's generally how I think. I always have this idea of like, okay, let's see if I have something to bring to the table. So I would say my first reflex is to think, okay, what do I have to give? My goal is maybe to get something, but my first action will always be, okay, what do I have to give? That's the first thing that I would always do. In that case, it was actually give. How would I say that? A really non-status based conversation. Like just behaving with him as if he was a normal person that I just met, and have fun in the way that I would, and like not necessarily show respect or too much care, and be careful with what I say. So in that case, um, I could see very quickly from meeting that person that people don't really treat this person in a normal way, that everyone has an agenda behind and everything. And I was just absolutely normal. And I took him as like a normal guy that he was, instead of being this like, massive known celebrity or person of influence. That was number one. So that's something that I provided, and it was also tested, right? I couldn't know immediately that it would be what the person needed. It's just that I tested that, and this person didn't, think that I was like, for some reason, trying to compete with him status wise. He immediately fell into the frame and loved it. So I just continued doing that. So sorry, I'm just thinking also like how I do these things, 'cause it's not obvious. Like it's so integrate. I don't know. It's so, I don't know, second nature almost, that I don't even know. So I test something, and then I look at the feedback, and then I just calibrate to whatever is necessary. If it works, I do that. If not, I need to do something else until I find an opening and something that works. In order to do that, there is like two or three things that are kind of necessary, in my opinion. One is really connect with the person, and that's all the time. Like if you're not in rapport with someone, fuck the power dynamic. It's just like nobody is gonna fall for that, in my opinion. The second is understand and like get a really good understanding of how they work and how they function. That's what I did with this guy really fast. Doesn't necessarily have to be 3 hours of conversations and talking about their childhood. It can just be understand, okay, what does this person get in his life a lot? In this case, it's some form of like, it's very low real human connection. And what does this person need? Okay, real human connection. I can already provide that in some way, right? So it's very simple. Sometimes it's just observe what the person needs and how, and then provide them with something like that that will build rapport, will make an initial interaction going. And three, I think, is to get some form of leverage to establish the power. So in every power dynamic, you need to have a leverage. Sometimes it's just your name, your status, someone introduced you to the person. That always works. Sometimes it's find a good reason for them to actually value you. And that's not by bragging. And in this case, in this example that I said, it was actually about quickly opening up about myself. So when people have a lot of power, people or with the status, people are actually scared to talk to them. Either they will come to them with problems that they wish a solution for, or they will like really be careful to not say the wrong thing because they might need them at some point. So what I did is very quickly, because this person obviously like also ultra powerful people don't share about them very easily when they don't know someone. So that's a fact. If someone has a lot of money, guaranteed he's not going to talk about his personal life. He's just going to talk about the things that he wants to talk about. I immediately went into talking about some things that luckily this person related to in terms of the feelings, the emotions. And again, it fit into this frame of like, oh, finally I have a normal, genuine conversation with a guy that doesn't just see me as a dollar sign that he can use or that he can relate. And so that was one thing. That was the first thing. And then quickly after that, I figured out that, to my surprise, this guy had a lot of self-doubt about the things he was saying to me. He shared at some point in a moment of like micro vulnerability that generally when he talks to someone that he appreciates, likes, or that he values, he is always asking himself if the thing he says are right or not. Essentially, what he said in that sentence is, when I'm in front of someone that I appreciate, I want to be reassured that I'm okay. Yeah. Doing that gave me immediate power in the situation. That makes me memorable immediately, and it makes me someone that is relatable. But again, it needs to come from the right place. So what's most important in this is that at every point, my intention was to find a generative relationship, like a co-creative relationship, something where like we will have like win-win in every case. That's why I come and I give first and those kind of things. I think it can be done also with what you said, like just straight up going for manipulation. But I think people that are slightly more intelligent, not intelligent is probably not the right word, but more experienced, will see through that. Like if someone comes and is trying to sell me something, I know, it's fine. You don't need to. He doesn't need to have a sign, So I think people that deal with this on a regular basis, that see on a daily basis people try to influence them, they just know, right? So you cannot really come with that frame. It needs to be a different one.
I fully agree with you that you're talking about generativity, a co-creative relationship. My two rules for any interaction, whether it's dating or with a client or with just another human. First, I try to figure out how we can collaborate to create an emotional experience. I don't try to figure out what's going to be valuable to them necessarily. I definitely test, and then go down the right path, right? Like it's all about calibration. So my first rule is, how do we create an emotional experience? And it doesn't, you said memorable, and I think that's correct, right? In my line of thinking, but it's more than memorable. I don't just need to be remembered. It's how do I create the most intense emotional experience? And sometimes it's a negative emotional experience. It's argumentative. It's something, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Yes.
It doesn't have to be all happy and whatever. I just need to create something emotional so that I have an anchor of humanity, right?
Yeah, that is true. When you disagree with people, that can also absolutely help to bond.
Or if they're like angry at something and you team up with them to be angry at the same concept. Political stuff is the same way, right?
Yes.
So that's the first thing, emotional experience. And then secondly, how do we project into the future collaboration? Right? I was saying that earlier with the dating thing. It's like, how do I create an emotional experience? And then how do we future project us hanging out? Right? Those are my two rules for every interaction. And what that does is it removes my necessity to try to impress because I'm constantly switching and calibrating, trying to figure out what's going to create an emotional situation for both of us. It's co-created, right?
Yeah, it needs to be good for you for sure. Yeah.
And it
Yeah, I
removes
like the way
it
you put it.
removes the need to impress, and it also removes the need to sort of mind read what they're doing,
Yes.
right? Because if
Mhm.
you think too much in the mind reading thing, you're in your head. You can't like be in the moment, right? But if you're constantly throwing things against the wall and seeing which ones they pick up on, and you're looking for those cues, you can adapt and turn on a dime very, very easily, and start creating that co-created emotional experience. And they have an investment in that. It's not just
Yes.
you showing your value or you finding a way to help them or finding a way to empower them. It's you and them together finding a moment that's uniquely yours together. And I think that's what
Yeah, yeah.
sets the groundwork for the communication you were talking, or the
But
connection you were talking about.
that would be really more about connection, though.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. That's not really about power, right? So that sets the ground, as you said. So that's like a
Well, like you
uh,
said, you
in.
need
Mhm.
connection and rapport in order for power to happen. Like fuck power if you can't connect with a human. Because
Well, in our goal of what we want to create with people, I agree. But as you said before, not necessarily. Like if I know that you can make a lot of money and I can make a lot of money and together we can make more money, we don't necessarily need to have a connection. We have a rapport because we have a common interest. And that's not a genuine, real human connection where we can like do all the things that you're saying, right? But we can absolutely co-influence each other in that sense.
um I'm not sure if I care enough to unpack that example, but sure, I'll leave that. There are
Okay.
other forms of power for sure. Like
Yeah.
like when I'm stopping a fight in
Well,
a
I think
club,
it's important.
they don't
Mhm.
have I don't have to have human connection. I have to show
Yeah,
dominance,
right.
right?
Correct. Exactly.
You know,
That's correct. Yes.
but specifically for coaching for sex and getting like yeah.
Well, anywhere where you wish to see the person again in 5 years and laugh with them, that's for sure, something you need.
but
100%.
but you were saying that like anybody that I feel like I'm respecting, somebody in front of you that you want to gain their approval, and then you don't know what to do, you're always second guessing yourself. Like
Hmm.
my strategy for that is specifically
Is
to
to get out of
co-create
that.
an
Yes.
emotional experience, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's
Mhm.
the goal I was talking about when I was moving in that direction.
Yes. Okay. I understand what you're saying. I agree. So that's more of a strategy to not like, to not have to second guess yourself. I guess I'm probably doing that because I've trained myself to do so because I didn't even think about it. But I think it's absolutely valid. It's like a necessity because otherwise you're in your head and you just want to impress, and the other person will perceive that, or that you're trying to manipulate. Like it's just not going to put you in the right headspace. So I 100% agree with what you said. Yeah,
Awesome. Well, that seems like a good place to wrap it up, and we can talk about all sorts of cool stuff
100%.
tomorrow.
Yes, let's do that. That's awesome. It was
Awesome.
a long
Well,
podcast today. It
what?
was long today.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I get that a lot.
A lot to unpack.
So the show notes have all of the links for the things that we were talking about today. And if you are watching us on YouTube, please give us a subscribe and then hit the notification bell because it helps us disseminate the content out to more and more people. Thank you for that. If you have any questions or things that you want us to talk about in these things, because we're going to be doing them for at least we committed the next 6 months. We're definitely going to cover it if you drop it in the comments or whatever. So reach out to us and we'll be happy to continue to delve into these things. Thank you for joining us on the Limitless podcast, and we will see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Duke.